All right. Today is August 1st, 2012. My name is Latasha Wilson, and I'm with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University Library. I'm in Stillwater, Oklahoma today at the home of Mille Naff, and I will be interviewing Mille as part of the Spotlighting Oklahoma Oral History series. So thank you for having me here today.
I'm glad to have you. I've been wanting to do this mainly for my children.
Well, I'm glad to be here. To start out with, would you tell me when and where you were born?
I was born in Olathe, Kansas on December 31st, 1921.
And were you born in a hospital or?
No, at home.
Were you the first child?
No, I'm next to the last.
Of how many?
Well, my mother had 6 children, but she lost 2, so 4.
Okay.
Raised with 4. 2 brothers, 2 older brothers and a younger sister.
What were your parents' names?
Charles August Hyer and Amelia Benaid Hyer.
Is that H-I-G-H?
H-Y-E-R.
H-Y-E-R. And what were their professions?
Well, my mother was a housekeeper. My father manufactured boots and shoes. Mostly, my grandfather was the originator of the cowboy boot, as far as we know. There's some argument about that, but we're not positive. But he did have the first major manufacturing company, and he came to Olathe to teach shoemaking and harness making to the School for the Deaf.
Wow.
And from there, he went on to start making cowboy boots first. And later we went into military, English style also. And they were all custom made. They made orthopedic shoes. And they were originally, so the cork didn't show. They put the cork inside the shoe for crippled people.
Wow.
And they also made shoes for a giant for the circus who wore a size 22.
Wow.
And I don't know what happened to that last. I've meaning to ask and keep forgetting, because I used to take my friends into the boot factory and show them that last, which was about like that.
Was that a circus that was based in Kansas?
Ringling Brothers, I think. I'm not sure about that, but we did make shoes for lots of famous people, boots, Will Rogers among them. My brother had possession of his letters that he wrote to the factory. I don't know what's happened to him now. My brother's deceased. I suppose some of his children have. But made, of course, a lot of people ask about Tom Mix. We made some boots for Tom Mix, but he thought we ought to make them free for him, and my family disagreed with that.
He could probably afford them.
They thought he could afford to buy his own, that they'd make boots for somebody that couldn't afford them. But among cowboys, Ken Maynard, and they made shoes for Dwight Eisenhower, and goodness, I don't know how many others, but lots of famous people bought. And tanneries said that only one hide out of every 1,000 that they cured were good enough for our factory. So
wow.
They used only the best.
The factory was based in Olathe?
In Olathe, and my father sold out after 94 years.
Wow. What year was that he sold out?
1967, I think, or thereabouts.
What was the name of the company?
C.H. Hyer and Sons. His father was Charles Henry.
Do you know how people would place orders and how the shoes would be shipped?
Yes, I should have a copy somewhere, but they had a form made, and they would and it told them how to do it, how to measure their feet, and they'd send the form with a tape measure and all, and then they had the imprint of a foot, and they draw their own foot in that, and then measure the ball of their foot and the heel, and told how to measure. And, they guaranteed them to fit. If they didn't fit, they made another pair.
Wow.
The whole process took probably 2 weeks. Of course, it took longer than that because there were assembly line type putting together. Mm-hmm. But if they went straight through, it'd take about 2 weeks to make them.
Do you know how many people were employed there?
Toward the last, over 100. Not ever very big. My grandfather brought a good many people from Germany, where his father came from, for shoemakers. And one shoemaker went back because he thought we lived in a free country. He thought everything was free. He was disappointed that everything wasn't free. But yes, I knew a lot of them very well, and they were all wonderful men and families.
Where did your grandfather originally come from?
Illinois. I mean, his father, of course, came from Germany and landed in New York. And I don't know exactly what got them to Illinois, but of course there were a lot of tanneries in Illinois, and they've all been in the shoe business.
Even his father, your grandfather's father, from Germany, was he in the shoe business?
Yes, my grandfather's father was a shoemaker too. And he was orphaned and apprenticed to a shoemaker. And,
wow. So, growing up, did you help out at all with shoes?
Did I what?
Did you help in the shoe factory and with the process?
Did I what? I'm sorry.
Did you help as a child? Did you have chores in the shoe
factory? No, we were very spoiled. My sister learned to do the upper stitching, upper tops, but I never did. I wasn't patient enough to sit there. I was extremely active. Of course, she is too, but no, I really didn't do. My older brother learned every step and could make a pair of boots. He's now deceased. I think he taught one of his sons, but he doesn't use it.
Well, what was life like growing up in Olathe?
Oh, well, I couldn't have asked for anything better. It was a small town with all the advantages of a big city because Kansas City was right there. But there were only like 200 students in junior high and high school altogether when I graduated from high school. It's now, I don't know what the population is, well over 30,000 now, maybe more. I think much more, but it's kind of a bedroom city for Kansas City. Although when I say Kansas City, I think of Kansas City, Missouri, rather than Kansas City, Kansas, because we always went to Kansas City, Missouri to do our shopping. And, Kansas City, Kansas is more of an industrial city. And, so
where did you start school?
Where did I go to school?
When you, in first grade or?
Well, I started when I was 5, I guess, and went all through the school system. Kansas has a very good school system. I don't know whether you know that or not. At least they did, and I think they still do. My husband, who was raised in Atlanta, was always amazed at what we were offered in school. We had music appreciation and art. For a little bitty school, that was quite a feat. But, from there, I went to a girls' school in Virginia called Virginia Intermont College. It's just still in existence. Of course, government decrees no girls' schools or boys' schools anymore, but it's still a very fine liberal arts school in the mountains of Virginia.
How did you choose to go there?
Well, that's interesting too. We had a landscape architect working in our yard who took an interest in me, and he thought he was thinking of Bryn Mawr and Smith, but was not a good student. I was a play girl. And so I made a wonderful choice. I'm so glad I did, because I learned to study. It was quite strict and a new world for me. And I was a big fish in a little puddle, and I certainly wasn't. So it was really a wonderful choice to go to school. And in this school, they were very strict. We couldn't go downtown without a chaperone. We couldn't even accept rides home from church with church members.
Wow.
We either had to walk or take a taxi.
Was there a boys' school nearby?
I'm sorry?
Was there a boys' school nearby?
Well, of course, there were lots of them, not real close. There was Virginia Tech or VPI, and some of those schools that it was a Baptist school, and I was surprised they had dances at all. I didn't know it was a Baptist school. I went there. I was an Episcopalian, and anyway, like I say, the whole experience was wonderful for me.
How did you get there from Oklahoma?
On a train. I was from Kansas City. It took 32 hours to get there, and flying was almost impossible too. Either had to fly to Cincinnati and take a train, or fly to Washington, D.C. and take a train. And so it was kind of complicated. And we went from Olathe, Kansas, into Arkansas. And I have to stop and think. Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and back into, the school was on the border of Tennessee and Virginia, so we went back into Tennessee after going across Mississippi and Alabama.
Wow. Were you alone on the train ride?
Yes, another great experience. I had a sleeper, a berth, not a roomette, but a berth, because of course it was an overnight trip, and I had to change trains in Memphis. Not only change trains, but change stations. So I got whirly experience very young. But it wasn't the first whirly experience, because when I was 11, we went to the Chicago World's Fair. And believe it or not, they turned me loose at the fair all on my own to spend the day. In the evening, my brothers and I and my parents would meet at a certain gate. Some days, my brothers and I would just we were staying in what was called Clarendon Hills with friends. And we'd take the commuter train from Clarendon Hills into the fair. And then in the evening, my parents would drive in later, and then we'd all meet and go home together. And we even took our maid with us. She got to go to the fair too, and help with the household chores. There were lots of us staying with friends.
So was that in 1932?
32.
Well, what do you remember most about experiencing the fair?
Well, I got to shake hands with Marconi and Admiral Byrd, and I think it was one of the first major cable cars, rode the cable car across the top of the fair. Three very wonderful experiences.
Wow. How did you get to shake their hands? Did you wait in line to meet them, or?
It's very vague. We were down on the lake, and I don't know how. I think I went to look at the penguins when I got to meet Admiral Byrd. They were new. We didn't, people had never seen a penguin before that.
Wow.
And,
what's some of the food you remember eating at the fair?
Do I what?
Do you remember eating any particular food at the
No,
World's
not
Fair?
really. No, food wasn't one of the big deals, except that the family we were staying with, we had ham quite a bit. And then my aunt, who lived in Chicago proper, had us in for dinner and she had ham. We thought that was quite a joke. But we did have picnics in the backyard too, and the people that we stayed with were Nanette Todd. My sister's named after her, Nanette Ferguson Todd, and her husband was a career military man, and he was stationed there at the time, and that my mother and Nanette stayed friends all their lives. Mother died at the age of 95, and Nanette died of 101, so they had a long time to enjoy each other. And my father was very ill with almost an unknown disease when he was in his mid-40s, and the Todds were stationed at Fort Leavenworth then. So I was very privileged, I think. I got to spend every weekend at Fort Leavenworth riding horses and going to junior hops. Their son was a year older than I, and their daughter was a year younger.
That's fun.
And we stayed friends as long as they lived. But unfortunately, our children didn't get to enjoy the same friendship, but we were friends. Let's see, her parents, and then my grandparents were friends. My parents were friends, and their children, 3 or 4 generations. So.
Wow. Was that family trip to Chicago your first big family road trip?
No, we had gone to, gosh, I have to stop and think. It was one of the major ones. We'd gone to some lakes in Minnesota for the summer a couple of times. And I remember how beautiful the water was, and I caught one of the first big fish in the family. They had it mounted. I don't know what happened to it now. It was around for a long time. We moved into my grandfather Benade's home when I was 10. And it's my nephew's still living in it. And he's the 4th generation to live there. And it's on the historic register in Kansas.
How long did you live there?
From the time I was 10 until I married when I was 20, so 10 years. It seemed like a lot longer than that. I love it. We had 15 acres. We had our own spring and our own gas well. We had horses, and riding horses and cows, and all the things of farm, but I didn't have to do any chores.
Sounds pretty ideal.
What?
It sounds pretty ideal.
Well, it was. I was very, very fortunate. I was just very fortunate. And
do you remember your family feeling any different when the Depression hit?
No,
Were they
not at
affected?
all. In fact, it almost came as a revelation to me that I don't know whether I was blinded to it. Mother and Dad tried to keep everything low key, and I just, even though it was Depression time and I knew people didn't have as much as we did, I never thought about it. It just didn't occur to me how very, very privileged I was. I guess because I was so used to it. I don't know. But there were times when being the advantaged girl was not advantaged because people were jealous of us. And in fact, after I was grown and the school started having all school reunions every 5 years, which were just like going to heaven. We had so much fun because everybody knew everybody else in the town and was like a big family almost. Except, like I say, a few friends came up at a couple of the reunions and said, "You were the sweetest girl in school, and we treated you terrible." But I wasn't aware that I was treated terrible either. Occasionally there'd be something that would buff me, but I think I was just too happy-go-lucky to worry about it.
Did you have many family members living near you, like cousins and aunts and uncles?
In Olathe?
Mm-hmm.
Well, all of my dad's family lived in Olathe, and he had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And when we moved into my grandfather's place, which was supposedly out in the country, it was less than a mile from downtown, but we were on the county side of the road, and his brothers built houses across the street from us. So we lived in a compound, and they were in the city. But we all grew up pretty close. They were, before they moved there, they were in a compound on the other side of town. We didn't call them compounds, but that's what it amounted to. And so all of my dad's family lived close by. And Mother's family mostly lived. Her oldest sister lived in California, and we never saw much of them. But I knew her. Well, one sister was a widow, and visited from Kansas City quite frequently, and we were very close.
Were there many German traditions preserved?
No, not in our family, hardly any. And I think most people try not to.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally we'd learn a German word or something, but no, we didn't practice any German traditions at all.
What were Christmases like growing up?
Christmas?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wonderful. Santa was always very good, and had lots of fun.
Would the family all get together at your house since you moved into the grandfather's?
Most of the time we had our Christmas mornings with each family had their own, and then for many years they'd take turns hosting dinner. The brothers and sisters would take turns hosting the family dinner. And nowadays, the children eat first, but back then, we didn't, the grown-ups ate and then we ate. But it didn't seem to bother us. We were having a good time playing together and playing with our new toys, so it didn't make any difference. But,
do you remember any favorite recipes or dishes that you enjoyed growing up?
Oh, my mother used to make the best spice cake in the whole world. And she used black walnuts on it. We had lots of black walnut trees. So we had more black walnuts than we did pecans, but it sure was good. It's made with sour cream, and we always had plenty of sour cream because we had cows on the place, and made our own butter and our own. We had cream that was so thick you had to take it out of the pitcher with a spoon. I call it spoon out cream. Somebody said, "What in the world is spoon out cream?" It took me a long time to eat cereal with milk.
Oh.
Like a dessert.
So when you went to college, did you write letters home, or how did you communicate?
Yeah, regularly. Then I was all packed and ready to go back when I decided I wanted to go to KU and transferred to KU.
What year was that?
Oh, I graduated from high school in 40. It was 41 when I entered KU. And met my husband that year. We were married the following fall. The war hurried things along. He was there doing his graduate work for geology. And then after the war, he finished his PhD and we came here.
What were you studying at KU?
What was I? I was an art major. What I really was interested in, there was a store in Kansas City called Harshfeld's that had the most wonderful windows, decorated windows for different seasons. And they were so impressive. And they had, at Christmas time, had had moving figures. And they were all dressed so beautifully. I can remember that. So I wanted to go into window decoration. Of course, no university at that time taught it. You had to take courses in art and home economics. But I never used the career.
Did you end up graduating from KU?
No, I just had, I had a year there, and then we married, and then I went back after the war and took 2 more semesters, but I never did graduate. And I took courses here, but I never graduated.
Where did you get married?
Where were we married?
Mm-hmm.
We were married in my parents' home, in the home I grew up in beautiful stairs, 6 stairs this way and a landing across here, and then 12 stairs down. And the fireplace was right at the base. I played wedding there. My mother kind of wanted me to be married at the church, and I said, "Oh no, no way." I played wedding on those stairs. She was glad after it was all over.
So how did you meet your husband?
He was my cousin's roommate in a fraternity house, Sigma Chi fraternity. And I met him, I'm trying to think. I met him at Easter time I met him before that, I forgot. But just knew him casually. And then when he saw me, I was walking up the driveway of the Sigma Chi house to go see my cousin. And he remembered me. I met him in the spring of Easter, the year before, because my parents came to visit the school in Virginia, and my mother had a ruptured appendix and ended up spending 6 weeks in Bristol. And then I drove them home because my father was still recovering from his disease.
Wow.
And mother was unable to drive, so I drove them home. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come home for Easter. And that's when I met my future husband, but I didn't pay much attention. He had a date with a girl that ended up being a sorority sister of mine. And I went to see my boyfriend. But we all were out together when I met John. And then, as I say, I was walking up the driveway of the Sigma Chi house to see my cousin, and he said, he was out washing his car. He said, "You going to school here this year?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Good." Who's that? I didn't even remember it. But I did take an interest. And we started dating shortly after that.
What sorority were you in?
Delta Gamma. We don't have one here, a chapter here, but OU has a good chapter.
So what did you do after you were married? The war was going on?
Yes, I worked. Of course, John was in basic training for a good many months, and he went first from Olathe to Wayne, Pennsylvania, to Valley Forge Military Academy for his first training, and then to Yale University from there. And I joined him in Wayne. We only had weekends together because he had to stay in the barracks. But it was I lived with a very interesting family. The father was commandant of the military school. And his wife was a dancer and a teacher. And she had a kindergarten in the mornings, and then taught dancing in the afternoon, and then in the evening she went to the main line to teach ballroom dancing to the debutantes. And I got to go along and had lots of fun. And of course, my mother's family was originally from Philadelphia, so I had relatives there too that I visited for the first time.
So did you learn dance moves?
I didn't work while we were away because we were there for a very short time. But I worked in the mess hall. It was the freshman dining room for Yale University. But it was turned into a mess hall for the cadets. And it was huge. I helped in the mess hall, and we fed 3,000 cadets in an hour and a half.
Wow.
I learned to cut pies in 6 pieces just by spinning. Just spin the pie pan. For a girl that had never had to do anything, I learned a lot in a hurry.
Did you learn how to dance from the one?
I took dancing lessons when I was growing up. Yes, and she had a young lady, Gloria Stone was her name, who was studying ballet, living there. She was from the Dominican Republic. And so it was it was so cold the night that I got there on January 1st. And they put me in a bedroom in this great big Victorian house that had been shut off from the heat. And the mattress was like an ice cake. I had to put on my fur coat before I could get any sleep. I just couldn't get the mattress warmed up. It was so cold.
Wow. So was your husband deployed?
Was he what?
Did he go overseas?
Yes, he went overseas. Well, let's see. We went from Yale down to Florida. We were in New Haven all winter, and then went to Florida in the summer. But he was one of the top students in his class and was chosen to go to the first radar school, and went to radar school in Florida, and then was sent to Bell Telephone Labs from there. And he was in charge of the radar on 6 B-29s in Guam and Saipan. They moved from Guam to Saipan, then back after the war back to Guam. And so he was an electrical engineer as well as a geologist.
Where did you live while he was overseas?
With my parents. So.
And then when did he return?
I'm sorry?
When did he return?
Almost 2 years later. He was gone 22 months.
Were you able to stay in touch via letters?
We wrote every day.
Okay.
I have all his letters. When they were asking for letters, I should have sent them to Washington, but I didn't. Yes, we wrote every day, and it used to run my friends crazy if there was a span where the letters didn't come every day. And they'd come 4 or 5 at a time. I'd line them up according to date and read them one day at a time. And I thought they just couldn't believe I'd do that. I didn't rip them all open or read them all. I said, but then there's a dry spell and I don't have one. But it was not too terribly difficult because we were all in the same boat. All my girlfriends were home waiting too. My oldest son, 6 months younger than all their sons because he was delayed 6 months. He was on the ramp going up to the ship when his name and several other names were called to stay back. And they were there 6 months without anything to do. I don't know why they kept him so long. And he inherited a Jeep that some of the mechanics had made out of scraps of Jeeps. And so he enjoyed that until they told him he had to turn it in. And for what reason, I don't know, they ran it off in the ocean.
Wow.
But he got to explore all of Saipan and all of Guam with his Jeep before. He tells a funny story. When he went aboard the ship to go to Guam from Saipan, he asked the laters if he could. He introduced himself as Captain Naff, but I think they thought he said Chaplain Naff. And whistles blew and said, "Get the chaplain's Jeep on board." And I said, "You're lucky you weren't asked to conduct services."
Yeah.
But he was good. He was very good and poised, so he probably could have. But anyway, he got his Jeep to Guam and had it for a couple of months before they took it away.
What do you remember about the war effort on the home front? Did the shoe factory have many changes?
I'm sorry?
Did the shoe factory have many changes during the war? Your family's shoe business?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
During the war, were there changes at the shoe business?
Oh, yes. Yeah, there weren't many cowboys buying boots, and they made a great many kind of a jodhpur boot for the Navy people. It was a Navy base. It was the biggest inland Navy base in the United States other than Chicago. And they trained pilots there, but it also was a stopping off point for hospital planes. And I don't know why they unloaded some of them there, maybe because they needed to get others moved first, I don't know. But, and I worked at the Navy base during the war. For the little newspaper, I was the art director of the newspaper. And that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that a lot. I was a volunteer for the Red Cross. They had a canteen, 24-hour canteen on the base. So,
were you able to live at home and then just go to work every day on the base?
Yes, I had one brother in the service who was a pilot, and he never went overseas, but the other brother was a dairyman, and they told him he was more important at home than he was in the military. He volunteered several times. They said, "Go home, we don't want you." I think it bothered him terribly that he didn't serve, though.
Mm-hmm.
All of my boys but one have been in the service. I have two foster sons, and they were both in the Navy, and my oldest was a Navy pilot and then flew for Continental for 27 years. And my next to youngest was in the Army. Adam, the baby, was in the Navy. So they're mostly Navy. Of course, John was Air Corps then instead of Air Force.
So what happened when he came home? What did you all do?
Well, we went. He was already enrolled at Kansas University before he even got home, and we were able to buy a little house in Lawrence and rented out one bedroom, pay for the payments on the house. That sounds impossible now. The house cost $9,000 and was 3 bedrooms, only 1 bath, but had a full basement.
Wow.
And we were, like I say, we actually rented out 2 rooms, and that paid the payments on the house.
And
this
then,
house, the original, that wasn't there, and the dining room was a master bedroom when we built this house. But we built this house for $14,500, including the lot.
wow.
But it's been added on to. We built it to one. We only had one son when we built this house, and we built what we could afford. But we knew we were going to have more family, so we built the house to one side of the lot so we could add on to it. And 10 years after we built it, we added that wing, which is 2 bedrooms and a bath, back there.
And when did you move to Stillwater?
In 1949.
And did you build this house in 1949?
We moved into it. We came in January of 49 and moved into this house in August of 49.
Did you just rent from January to August?
No, but we did have students live in and work for their room and board. They mostly babysat and did dinner dishes. I hated dinner dishes so much because I never had to do them. We got up from the table and helped in it. And that was the hardest thing for me to get used to. I loved cooking. I didn't mind cooking. I didn't mind housekeeping. But I hated getting up and having to do the dishes. So they used to, I don't know whether they still have it, but they had an employment office for students.
Okay.
And I called and had wonderful luck most of the time. You figured out what their room and board was worth and that they did that much work for us. So it worked out very fine. Their main duty was babysitting and doing the dinner dishes.
So you all moved to Stillwater because your husband got a job at the university?
Oh, yeah.
In geology?
Yeah, we've been here 63 years. And in this house.
Yeah. What was your first impression, or what were your first impressions of Stillwater?
Oh, I thought it was just a stopping off place because being a geologist, I thought we were going to travel the world. And
well, what was Stillwater like in 1949?
Well, this house was out in the country. It was on Lover's Lane. We were the first house here, and the only street was 2 car paths, 2-wheel paths in front of no street at all. Orchard Lane was there, and it was paved. But University was not paved past Walnut. And there was a streetcar. And they did away with it just as we came, but it ran out on 4th Street as far as Walnut.
Wow.
And turned around and went back.
So did it run on tracks?
And there was nothing visible to the south except a barn about half a mile away. Otherwise, you look to fields all the way to the south. There were 3 houses on Orchard Lane. Old families lived there, the Simanks and Swanks. Can't remember, but and then the Peyton Glass, whose family, he and his wife Marguerite and their son lived over here on the corner. And, they didn't live there when we moved in. The Ernests that had a shoe store here lived there then, but Mr. Glass, or Peyton Glass, and his wife Marguerite and their son lived one summer in this house while we were at geology camp in Colorado. And so that's the way we got acquainted with them. They became quite good friends.
Well, as the wife of a new professor, did you have much interaction with the university?
Did I what?
Did you have much interaction with the university to start out with OSU?
I don't know. When we came here, we were told that the town people and the university people didn't mix. And I said, why not? I said, well, they just don't. And I said, well, that's silly. And we really worked at trying to. And Dr. Calm, as late as Dr. Calm, he recognized that John and I had done a lot to mix. But I use this as an example. One time at a church meeting, they were electing officers or something, I don't remember what. And they said, oh, we don't want to elect her. She's with the university. She's only temporary.
Uh-huh.
And that, I guess that was their attitude, that they'd get established and then they'd leave. Mm-hmm. And the minister said, temporary, we're all temporary. But things began to change, and they got to where they mixed more. They tried to have a university club that never really took off, and they combined with the country club, kind of. And that helped get it started, too. When they started building the country club, they made it a point to include university people, especially those that had tried to organize a university club.
Yeah.
I think we're one of the few universities that doesn't have a university club. They tried.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of changes, but they're so gradual you don't, unless you just sit down and think about it or talk about it, you just absorb it.
Looking back over the years, what would you say have been some of the most major? Some of the most major changes.
Oh, gosh. Stoplights first, and street paving. Like I say, it wasn't paved. University wasn't paved past Walnut until.
And there weren't many stoplights?
Not many. In fact, the high school kids sold fruit, or I've forgotten what they sold, but they made money to put a light in by the high school, which is now the center.
The public or the community center?
Yeah, the community center was the high school when we came here. And they worked to get a stoplight by that instead of the city paying for it.
Wow.
And the only stoplight when we came, trying to think, it wasn't on Main and 6th. Where was it? Maybe it was. Maybe that was the first light. I can't remember for sure.
Did you frequent businesses on Main Street?
Did I what?
Did you go to businesses? Did you shop at businesses on Main Street?
Yeah, that was the only shopping area. That's one of the major changes, really, is and I was sorry to see downtown go, and Katz was the finish of it. It's, of course, reviving, thank goodness, but it is not a shopping area. It was convenient, at least for me, to go downtown instead of clear out Perkins Road.
Yeah.
But I had the pleasure of knowing Mr. Katz and his daughters.
What do you remember about him?
Well, mostly that he just loved to visit with people, and he'd sit on that round cushion that they were known for, visit with people, and gave the kids suckers. He always had a bunch of suckers. Just a very fine man. He helped a lot of students.
How old were his daughters at the time?
Well, I was very close to Helen, and she was, I think, 95 when she passed away. I still stay in touch with her son. He lives between California and Aspen. He's been battling cancer. And I haven't heard, I was mostly at Christmas that I hear from him, and I had my granddaughter-in-law take pictures of the restaurant, the Brooklyn restaurant, to send to him, but she hasn't sent them to me yet. But,
it's neat they preserved that sign.
What?
In Brooklands, it's neat that they preserved the Katz sign.
Well, I didn't see the sign. But
It's downstairs in the lower area.
Well, I didn't know that, but I haven't been downstairs. But I'll have to get my son to go down.
Well, let's talk about some of your hobbies over the years. You were just saying...
I think I was hyperactive. I didn't settle on anything special. I had such a wonderful childhood. I'll show you a picture of it after a while. The house we moved into had a pump house made out of limestone. And it was, my grandfather put it in to pump the water from the spring. And it pulled the water as far as the pump house, then pumped it into the house. They were one of the first ones to have running water in Kansas. And anyway, when my parents took over the place, Dad had the pump had a hole dug and had the pump put down on the ground with big concrete squares that would ring, and it could be lifted out and put a fireplace in that, and that was my playhouse. and it was as I got older, we used it. There were 2 city reservoirs at the end of our pasture, and we'd ice skate on those. And my friends and I would take hot dogs and marshmallows and all and leave them it was halfway to the lake. We'd leave those at the little house or the playhouse and build a fire in the fireplace. Come back to a toasty little house and have our hot dogs and marshmallows. So it was not only a playhouse, but my sister never used it. She never, but I loved it. And, had slumber parties there. And my nephew, who's done a wonderful job of refurbishing the place, hasn't done much to that, which is a disappointment to me. It's not going to cave in because the limestone's this thick, but the roof's bad. He has 2 children, but they don't use it either, of course. Hardly know it's there. But
then in your later teenage years, you pursued a pilot's license?
in my teenage years, what?
You got your pilot's license?
Yes. The summer I graduated from high school.
What made you want to do that?
Gosh, I think everybody wanted to learn to fly. My brothers actually got a club started, and then one did end up being a pilot in the Air Corps, but he never took lessons at the club. But I was working that summer at the boot factory, so I saved my money and signed up. My parents weren't very thrilled about it, so I didn't tell them I was going. I didn't story, but I didn't tell them either. And I went early in the morning because of the wind. And one morning my father went upstairs to wake me up, and I wasn't in bed. And he was scared. He was afraid I'd eloped with my boyfriend. So when he came out to get the paper, and I was sitting on the back steps reading the paper, he was so relieved that I'd been out flying. But I ran out of money before I was through, and they said, "Well, you're this close. We'll pay for the rest of it. So you might as well finish." So they helped me finish. It was $11 an hour, which is, of course, now is nothing. But that was quite a bit back then.
Wow.
My instructor was a World War I pilot. His face looked like a relief map. Wrinkles were so deep from flying in open cockpits. Very interesting man. I was the first woman he ever soloed. He was so excited. He said I flew better than a lot of the men he taught.
So did you do much flying on your own after
No, it was till we got married that next year, and it was just too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't afford to. I'd flown with my son Peter, had his own plane for a while, but I didn't really pilot the plane. I just went flying with him.
And then I've heard about some other hobbies you've taken up over the years.
Well, I have a scuba license. Swimming is probably my biggest hobby, but my husband used to say I didn't have any hobbies. And I said, no, yes, I do. I have 5 children and you. That's a hobby. No, I stayed busy raising children mostly. And then the twins were friends of my oldest son and on the high school wrestling team. And their father decided he didn't want to keep them through college and told them they had to move. And Peter came and asked if they could live with us for a couple of weeks. I was pregnant with Adam. I call them my triplets that are 20 years apart. But anyway, they came for 2 weeks and ended up being here 6 years.
Oh my goodness.
We saw them all the way through college and until they got married.
Wow.
They had masters. They were in the Navy Reserve and they spent several months at sea each year. And,
What were their names?
Don and Ron Uterberg. Your father was fire chief here and head of the fire publication. Everett Uterberg.
Wow.
And he's a very lucky man. They're all marvelous children.
Wow.
Outstanding. The twins were both teachers, and his oldest son was a teacher, and his daughter is extremely talented and musical, and she plays the piano, the organ, sings, and she can play the, I want to say dobro, that's not what it is.
Oh.
Dulcimer?
What?
The hammered dulcimer?
Yeah, dulcimer.
Okay.
What was I saying?
Well, where would you go scuba diving?
Where what?
Where would you go scuba diving?
Well, I took lessons at the university, and then the lakes were flooded that year. We had a hard time finding a lake clear enough to, and I've forgotten now where it was, some place over in Missouri that we passed our tests. Found an automobile at the bottom of the lake.
Oh my gosh.
And a motorcycle.
Wow.
They didn't know we were there. It was lots of fun. Peter, my oldest son, did a lot of scuba diving. In fact, 2 of the boys are also skydivers, and they said, "Mother, that's the only thing you haven't done." I was 80 years old when they said that. I said, "Well, you make arrangements and I'll go." But my legs wouldn't hold me up now.
Oh.
They never made the arrangements.
Well, tell me some more about your children. What are their names?
Peter is the oldest. His name is Peter Benade, and my mother's maiden name. And Emily is a family name on my mother's side. And then there's John Timothy. And my husband, all 4 of my husband's grandfathers were John or Jonathan. And when we were trying to steer clear of family names, not because we didn't like them, but because there were too many already. My family didn't know anything but Charles, Henry, and Bill. And John's family didn't know anything but John and Joe. But when Tim came along, I thought, well, it's terrible to have a boy and not have a John.
So we were talking about your children. There was after Tim.
Yeah, Emily is second, and then Tim, and then 10 years later, or 9.5 years later, came Stephen Charles, named after both grandfathers. And then Adam is an original name in John's father's family, and they're Swiss. We have a picture, I'll have to get it out and show it to you, of genes carry a long way.
Oh.
We have a picture of Adam Naff in Switzerland in 1500, and Adam took it to, when he was working for the Navy, took it to work and said, "Any of you know who this is?" And they said, "Well, no, but it looks like you."
Wow.
And it's uncanny how much they look alike.
Huh.
400 years later, 500 years later. I'm not quite sure where it is, but it's unbelievable. You'll not believe it.
So you've added on to your house over the years.
I'm sorry?
You've added on to your house over the years.
Oh,
You were saying?
Adam did a lot of genealogy, and he got it while he was working on the genealogy.
Well, your house,
Oh, our house?
how it's been added on to.
Well, as I told you, we built it to one side because we knew we were going to have more children than one. And in fact, I was pregnant with Emily when we were building it. Anyway, we added the 2 bedrooms and a bath here, good-sized rooms, and made the bedroom here into an efficiency apartment for John's mother when she came to visit. She helped financially do it because she said, when I come to visit, I don't want to put anybody out of their bed. So she gave us the bulk of the money to build on so she could have a bedroom. And then after the fire, we just changed it to one big bedroom with kind of office space at one end for John.
And then over the years, the neighborhood and the town has built up around you.
We were the first house on this street. And I'm trying to think, the house up on the corner was second. And then the one house on that side of the street. The big white house that faces on 4th Street was there. It belonged to the Pennies, who had a shoe store here. And then when the country club was built, they almost built an identical house, only smaller, out of the country club. And there's only been 3 owners since they sold it. I don't know the new people. I've never met them, but I knew all the others pretty well.
Where would you do most of your grocery shopping throughout the years?
At her father's grocery store. It was called the Stillwater Fruit Market. Did it almost all exclusively there, a little bit at Safeway now.
Where was that located?
Well, it was first located on 6th Street, down where what's there, 4th Street?
Well, there was Simpson Pontiac on that corner. You know where the McDonald's is, kind of that corner. So it was there on 6th Street, just a little bit.
Then they moved.
East of
They
that.
moved over where the funeral home's reception
Seventh
is
Duck.
Strode.
on Duck.
Yes.
Okay.
And her parents were very dear friends, very close friends. In fact, we had dinner together, supper together, cookouts, at least once a week.
Would you say her name again on the tape?
Forrest Ann Newcomer.
Okay.
We have 2 close friends named Newcomer, and they're not kin.
And went to the same church. It was crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah, we all went to the same
kind of a coincidence because the
Yes.
church is small.
Uh-huh.
And,
What church is it that
the
you...
Episcopal Church, St. Andrews.
Okay.
I think that they may have been kin way back when if
Yes.
they wanted to look it up,
Possible.
because Forrest Ann's father's family was from Pennsylvania, and Stan's family was from Pennsylvania. So they probably were,
Yes. That's true.
Right. Not knowingly.
Yeah. And did you run for political office?
Yes, I ran for state representative in 1964.
Okay. How did that come about?
Well, I was helping. There weren't very many Republicans around, and I was helping Henry Bellman and a wonderful lady named Lee Head, who has written several books. She's deceased now. Trying to find somebody to run for state representative. And we went all over Stillwater for everybody that we knew that might possibly do it. Was not successful, and then went to Cushing. And the man that ran for the first time as a Republican senator, Oscar Ford Company over.
Okay.
Oscar Anderson, ran for Senate. Anyway, we were sitting here at the end of the day talking about it, and as a joke, I said, well, it looks like I'll have to do it. And of course, I had gotten disgusted because the people we talked to all said, I don't have time. And I thought, surely you have time for something that important, because Oklahoma was in need of a two-party system very much. And so my first words were almost, I don't have time. But I caught myself and said, oh, I'm not capable of that. I can't do that. And they said, oh, yes, you can. You're smart enough. You can read. And so I did it. And Stephen was 18 months old, and I'd take him in a stroller in the morning and go out to campaign and knock on doors and visit with people. And I'd go up one side of the street for half my time and come back on the other side, come home and fix lunch, and go back out in the afternoon. Stephen would sleep in the stroller. And I called on almost everybody in Stillwater at that time, and even got to Cushing.
Wow.
We took a month's vacation during that time back east, and I'd write letters to the paper about all the historic places we'd been. And my ads are in the archives in Washington. They asked me to send it. This is terrible, I don't remember her name, but did all my ads free of charge, and they were wonderful. They were quite different. And I only spent like $600 on my campaign, totally. There wasn't any money. The Republicans gave me $100, and then two friends called. I made a list of people that might possibly contribute. And I said, don't ask for anything over $25 because I don't want to be behooving.
Wow.
And they got $500, which was quite a lot then.
Yeah.
What was your campaign slogan?
I don't think I had a slogan. Just mainly that we needed a two-party system. And did. Everybody said, oh, you're a Republican because you came from Kansas. And I said, no, I'm not. We registered Democrat like we were told to do. When we came, and I said, I got home from registering, and I got to thinking, no wonder there's no Republicans in Oklahoma. Everybody does like we do. And I decided that, so I got the Democrat and the Republican platforms and studied them. And decided I definitely was a Republican, and switched over. And they asked me to, this was kind of scary, they asked me if I would be willing to go in our precinct and ask for donations and see if they would be interested in changing their
party affiliation?
Registration.
Wow.
It took a lot of courage. And I won the prize for getting the most money. I got $10. There wasn't a prize, but I won I got the most donations. But everybody was just really wonderful. I mean, I didn't have the door slammed in my face once. And some people were actually glad that something was happening. So I felt like Mrs. Republican for quite a while.
And were you involved in Henry Bellman's?
Oh, I was involved. Yeah, I went to the state convention several times and was chosen to go to the national convention in Seattle, but I couldn't afford to go. I had to turn it down. But I wish I'd gone now. I wish I'd borrowed the money. But it was lots of fun. I enjoyed it while I was in it. The first time somebody was ugly to me, it almost unglued John. But I said, that's just politics. Don't worry about it.
Who was your opponent?
Let's see, who was my opponent? Bob Murphy was Oscar Anderson's. Who was my opponent? Oh, gracious, he was an incumbent. Hesser, Jake Hesser. He was kin to almost everybody in the county. All the Hams and the Hessers. I got 42.5% of the vote. But I had, my calling cards were pastel. And when somebody wasn't home, I'd leave it in the door with a note saying, I'm sorry, I missed you, and if there's any questions, this is my telephone number. But I made a bargain with myself not to go into anybody's home, to visit on the porch or at the door, but not to go anybody's home. And one woman wanted me to come in, and I wouldn't. She was mad at me. She called me later and blessed me out for coming in. And I said, well, I just thought it was better if I didn't go into people's homes. But
Especially
most people were tickled. Said, I'll vote for you because you're the first one that's personally come and talked to us. So I guess I was a breath of fresh air. But a woman and a Republican in politics was almost unheard of. My parents came down for the listening party, and my mother said, you can't lose no matter how it turns out. It was fun. A great experience. We went to all the rural schools, both parties together, and gave speeches. And of course, giving a speech was pretty new to me. But one of them, I don't know why I was inspired, but I was inspired, and some longtime county Republicans said best political speech they ever heard. I don't know what I said now. I know I criticized the county commissioner because the roads were so bad getting there. And of course he was sitting there right beside me.
Did you stay very involved with politics after
Quite
that?
a while, yeah. Then when the last two boys came, and two more, it was just better to stay home and take care of children. There were, like I say, 7 children, all on a different schedule. 3 in college, 1 in high school, 1 in junior high school, 1 in grade school, and 1 at home. So
That would keep you busy.
yeah,
Yes.
it did. But one thing about our children all going to OSU, staying at home, going to college, they got a chance to know their younger brothers, which they never would have if they'd gone off to school. And they're all good friends, so that it made it. That's when I was sorry that they didn't have the opportunity to go off, but as it turned out, it was kind of a blessing. Peter wrestled for OSU.
Okay. And you could go cheer him on.
Ronnie was on the team too. What?
So you could go cheer him on. You could cheer him on.
Oh yes, I was. Everybody still talks about it. I sat on the floor right up close to the mat. Till the fire department made me quit doing it. I didn't know how to sit in a chair.
Now I go with her and she knows.
What?
Now I go with you and you say the same, the coach says the same things that you do. Because she really knows wrestling.
Of course, Ann is just a year younger than Peter. She's between Peter and Emily. They're almost like brothers and sisters. She also has twin brothers.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about how Stillwater has changed over the years?
Well, yeah, but I need prompting. Like I say, it's so gradual, but of course it's changed immensely. This was country from Walnut on out. It was country.
12th Street was just the back of beyond.
Just before we built our house, the Ducks owned all this land. And it was all farmland.
And then the highway to Oklahoma City.
Oh, when we moved here, that was just a dirt road. The highway didn't come in until, what?
I don't know, because we'd go on Old 77, you go through Mall.
They first rocked it, and then they tarred it with the clay and the rock. It made kind of a blacktop road. And then the highway came, 30 years ago, I guess. About 30 years ago. I say our street wasn't paved until it wasn't paved when Stephen was born. Dates escape me.
And then there's been a lot of changes at OSU.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. The geology department was in a Quonset hut when we came here. My husband was one of the first ones to be hired. Dr. Millett, whose father was head of the department at OU, was hired as head of the department. And he's not a doctor, Mr. Stocking taught geology, but I don't know how much geology he studied. He was a Christian missionary for many years. And then Dr. Stocking was here and taught mineralogy. So, of course, when they opened the geology department, they both came into the geology department. And John was the first one hired besides them. And then Alex Ross came right after that. And this is not in the history of the geology department, and I will not say why. I know why, but John's name was left out completely on the field camp, and he's the one that suggested it. And he suggested that OU be in on it with us, which they were. And for many years, they leased the land in Canyon City. Alex Ross helped build most of the cabins and more or less took over the camp because it was necessary for all of us to have another job in the summertime to make ends meet. And so John could work at the electronics lab. They were glad to have him there in the summer. The rocket firing lab that's no longer here. So he worked there and gave up his time at the camp, field camp, to Alex. But he's the one that suggested it and helped find the land and dug some of the ditches for the sewerage system.
Wow.
When
did John retire?
1980s. 1982, 81.
Yeah, it was the year I went to work for the post office, so it was 81.
He took early retirement, just a year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He was outstanding professor 4 times.
Wow.
That's great.
They still talk about him.
Did he have Boone Pickens as a student?
Right?
Did he have Boone Pickens as a student?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
He had Boone Pickens as a student.
Yeah, he had such a wonderful memory. He could he called roll by the roll call that they gave him from the registrar's office the first day. Next day, he could go in and call roll and tell them where they were sitting the day before. And even after for a long time he fought having big classes, but he had a couple with over 100 or more in it, and he could still do that.
Wow.
A fantastic memory.
Boone Pickens is probably his.
Oh yes, he's one of yes. We're still
Most-
good friends.
Okay.
We were fortunate enough to be invited to Boone's 50th birthday party out in Amarillo. That was quite an affair.
Oh, I bet.
And, yeah, Boone and I still stay in touch. And,
He
no,
mentions John.
not daily or
Okay.
weekly,
book.
but
Wow.
and then Herb Davis, who's a very fine alum, was responsible for the scholarship, the presidential scholarship in Johnson, my name.
Hmm.
He's the one that did all the work for that. We're most grateful for. And he's done a lot for the department too. Doesn't have as much money, but has done equally as much work, I'd say, for what he has. You know.
What was his name?
Herb Davis, they live in Edmond. Herb and Shirley Davis, and they're very dear friends and stayed friends.
Well, what does Oklahoma mean to you? What does Oklahoma mean to you?
It's home. I'm very proud of Oklahoma. I think it's wonderful. It's come a long, long way.
That's true.
They fought drought and depression like everybody else, but it was hit here in Kansas harder than almost any place. They just fought it out.
Strong. It takes strong people.
Yeah. Well, I think both Oklahoma and Kansas have the record for people living the longest. I'm not sure about that, but I think so. Longer lives. We're not as polluted as some states.
Yeah. That makes a difference.
Kansas has very little industry, and neither does Oklahoma. They've stayed a great deal farm.
Mhm. Well, is there anything else that anyone would like to bring up?
The mountain climbing that you and John did?
Right?
The mountain climbing that
Oh,
you and John
yeah.
did?
We traveled all over the United States with the children. They saw most 48 before they left home, and we camped out one summer. The summer I ran for office, we went. Stephen was 18 months old, and we went from here through Arkansas and down to Tennessee and then up the coast. And we're gone a month, and we only spent $400. That counted gasoline.
Wow.
We had a car caught on fire in Virginia, and we had to get a new axle, and that even included the axle. It happened close to where I went to school in Virginia. And,
Well, that's a good education for kids.
yes. Peter and John, we had a real good system. Peter and John had set up the tent. Emily and Tim would blow up the air mattresses, and I'd fix dinner. And then we'd do it in reverse, leaving in the morning. We didn't travel very far each day because there's too much to see.
Mm-hmm.
But we went all the way to Nova Scotia,
Wow.
clear to the top of Nova Scotia, and back through Buffalo, New York, and Niagara Falls, and then over to Detroit, and down through Detroit to St. Louis and Kansas City, and then here.
What kind of car were you driving?
Chevrolet station wagon. See the USA in your Chevrolet.
Sounds like you did.
Oh, it was fun. We had John. It was my creation. I'm going to take the credit for this. I had John build a platform that would folded the back seat down, and the platform was high enough for our suitcases to fit in under, and the ice chest and the picnic basket. And we put the ice chest and the picnic basket behind the front seats. And then we put a mattress over all the rest. But the platform opened up, hinged right, just big enough to open up the picnic basket and the ice chest so I could get to it to make sandwiches and get drinks. And then the other end folded up over the main part so we could set it out if we needed to, but we could get our bags in and out. But they could sit back there and play games and color, but there was so much to see on the East Coast and so many things. But we visited old military friends, and I still stay very close in touch with one of our military friends. Oh, that's another thing. When we moved here, Mrs. Monette thought I should write a book about the people that had lived with us, because when we were in the service in Florida, John brought 4 bachelor officers home for dinner. It took me all day to cook it. I'd not done much cooking at that time. That's when we moved from Connecticut to Florida. We had a wonderful apartment. We lived right on the beach. And it cost $75 a month. And what the poor man that owned it didn't know was he couldn't put us out when season came. The government wouldn't let him. And he got about $750 on season for the apartments. And it was a 3-room, but everything made into a bed. There was just a little kitchenette, 2 bedrooms, or actually a living room and a bedroom, and 2 bathrooms, and a kitchenette. And anyway, John brought these 4 fellows home, and 2 of them liked it so well, they just stayed. They just lived with us for 9 months while we were in Florida, and slept in the living room.
Did you cook for them regularly after
yes,
that?
Yes, they had to be on the base at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
And so I got up at 3 and fixed breakfast for them. And I really learned in a hurry. And of course, we had food stamps, we had rationing stamps. And I finally, when it was almost all over, said, have your mother send your rationing stamps to me. I'm the one that's using them. Or need them. And they did. But sugar and oil was the main thing. And of course, I used what bacon I could get. I cooked and saved the grease and used it, of course, and still do. Oh, but I made hot biscuits from scratch at 3 o'clock in the morning. Even eggs were hard to come by.
Wow.
But and you would think in Florida there'd be plenty of fresh fruit, but there wasn't. They shipped it all out. I thought we'd just live on fresh fruit, but we didn't. When we ran out of money at the end of the month, lieutenant's pay was $200, and $75 of that went to live in the house, and then the groceries, there wasn't an awful lot left. But when we ran out at the end of the month, I'd tell the 2 fellas, okay, you have to take us out to dinner. Which they did, but the 4 men that were there we all spent all our time together. Some of the other wives said, which one of those fellas is your husband? And one of them looked an awful lot like John, and I started to tell her that I couldn't. But from there, when we left Florida, a man named Victor Anigan drove to Kansas with us. John was stationed in Salina, Kansas, briefly. And Victor Anigan sounds Irish, but he was Turk. Drove with us. And then we went from Salina to Great Bend, and another bachelor officer came for dinner, and he stayed with us the rest of the time we were in Great Bend. He slept on a cot in the kitchen. And Lewis, whose wife I'm still in touch with in Baltimore, and we stayed close friends, camped together and did a lot of things together from the war on. And one time they were here visiting, and we were sitting here talking. We were out on the patio and we were talking, and the phone rang, and it was Phil Crane, the other one that lived with us in Florida, and his wife, and they were on their way through. So, but I wondered if they were killed in an accident or something. Never heard from them again. We had a good time. Nobody got mad at anybody. I sent him a Christmas card and it came back. So that's the only thing I can think of, is that they were in an automobile accident, because we never heard from them again.
Well, it sounds like you've been quite hospitable over the years.
Well, yes. And of course, since then, we've had a Korean boy live with us, a Japanese boy live with us. 2 Arabs stayed here when the Shah was being ousted. And one night we sat up till 4 o'clock in the morning discussing the politics of Iran. Iran, yeah. And I told them they were going to be sorry they kicked the Shah out. And they called him about a year after they moved. They called me and said, "You're right." But let's see, who else? The other newcomer family lived with us for 6 weeks. We had just finished that wing, and they had a chance to sell their house, and they were in the throes of building a new house. And Nita came and said, "Could we possibly stay in your new bedroom for a while till our house is finished?" I said, "Well, you can stay unless John's mother decides to come, and she has first priority." And 6 weeks later, she decided to come. But everybody at the church thought we were going to be out of our minds. Well, they thought we were both out of our minds, never be friends again. And we were better friends. Have fond memories, and they lined cots. We had twin beds in there, and then they lined cots for their 4 children against the wall. And there was nothing but a hot plate in there. But and I said, "I don't want the walls all greasy." And before John's mother said, "Oh, well, we won't cook in there. We'll make oatmeal, or we'll just eat cereal." And then she fixed sandwiches to take to school for lunch for the children and for herself. But we had them to dinner more than we didn't have them. We just had a real fine time. The children got along all right. Emily and Nancy, can Nancy spend the night? She is spending the night.
He's just over there. Well, you've had a few baseball teams stay here.
Yeah, we've had several baseball teams stay for the tournaments when they were 2 teams from North Carolina, not teams, 4 boys, 2 times from North Carolina, and 1 from Tennessee, I think. And they were all fun. I've told them they only knew how to turn the switch one way, and that was up. It never turned out a light.
Never turned
I
out.
don't mind turning out lights.
Well, I'm sure you've given a lot of people a good impression of Stillwater.
Oh, well, I hope
Through-
so. I hope I have. And, I love entertaining and have done a lot of entertaining.
Mhm.
My children laugh. They said I'm in my element when I'm entertaining. Homecoming, last year, all the children were here, not all the grandchildren. I have 22 grandchildren, and 24 and 25 will be here in October.
Wow.
Great grandchildren.
Mm.
We had a ball last year.
And did any of your children graduate from OSU?
Peter did, and the twins, and Adam just went 3 semesters and goofed. He's smart, but he wasn't interested. Emily never graduated, but she almost finished at KU before she married. She could have finished, I think, but she didn't. Stephen finished internet. He got his degree on the internet.
Wow.
I'm real proud of him. That takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah. And do you have any grandkids at OSU yet?
Let's see. Yes, Natalie.
Mm.
And Stacy went here a little while. Natalie's the only one, I think.
I can't think of anyone else.
What?
I can't think of anyone else.
No. Natalie's the only one that graduated from here. My daughter lives in California, and Stephen lives in Salt Lake, and Peter lives in Memphis, did live in Houston. Now, his son said his girls are going to OSU. He loves OSU. He didn't go to college. His wife's a college graduate. Her family came to the States from Columbia, South America.
No.
Brilliant girl and charming as can be. I'm very lucky with in-laws for the most part. Adam and Angela keep foster children.
Well, I really appreciate you visiting with me today.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. It'll all be in the library, university library.